everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today I'll be doing a review of the film When Harry Met Sally, which is a film I saw for the first time just this past weekend. But before going into my review, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button. It really does help and mean a lot. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this review because, yeah, I've never ever seen When Harry Met Sally before in my entire life. And so one of the first things that kind of intrigued me about the movie was actually in the opening credits when I realized that this film was made by Rob Reiner. I thought that that was incredibly interesting to see Rob Reiner being the person that actually directed and produced this movie, because obviously I'm a fan of Rob Reiner's work, especially films like The Princess Bride, but I just never had made the connection before that he was involved in any way, let alone the director of this film. And so that already kind of had me interested in the movie for that very reason. Not to mention, one of the other things that really caught my eye right away was just how well the visual effects were for this film, how well done the makeup and hairstyling was for this movie, because they were able to really do a great job aging both the characters played by Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal. I thought it was truly amazing to see how they were able to really capture that about the characters, how they were able to show these different stages in life. And so that's not only kudos to the hair and makeup team, but also to the actors themselves being able to portray these characters at different stages of their life, which of course also would mean that it would have to be, or we'd have to give some kudos to the writing of the film, which was written by Nora Ephron, which I thought the name sounded a little bit familiar, and sure enough, Nora Ephron was known for doing tons of movies very similar to this one, including You've Got Mail and others like it. And so I thought that was interesting to see that she kind of had a full grasp of the rom-com genre, especially with, I guess you could say, older actors, or actors that we perceive to be now in 2021 older than what they probably were when they made these movies, but maybe they were still older nonetheless. But with all that being said, there's just a lot of really good things to be seen in this movie as far as the actual acting and as far as the actual writing is concerned. Now, I will say that I, of course, like with many movies that portray divorce and remarriage and things like that, there are, I think, those key things in this film, which for me, obviously, as a Catholic, do bother me quite a bit, because it is something that, especially nowadays, has become a lot more prominent. We've seen it obviously have a major impact on our culture as well. However, luckily, I would say that the film doesn't focus as much on those different areas and really does instead focus on the relationship between Harry and Sally, and also able to focus more so on the friendship between them as well. It is interesting how, one of the opening lines of the movie and one of the kind of persistent themes is, men can't be friends with women, which obviously I think is something that has been thought for a very long time. So obviously Nora Ephron probably had someone in her life that she was able to kind of point to and probably base that character off of in certain ways, because I think that a lot of guys who were probably seeing this movie with their girlfriends or with their wives when this film first came out in 1989 were probably like, oh yeah, I totally think that way, or oh no babe, I don't think that way, but in the end they probably do. So I do think that it was able to kind of capture that understanding and that mindset that a lot of people probably hold to. That, of course, I look at that through my own lens, and I think to myself that I don't really believe that everyone thinks that way. I don't really believe that all men think that way, and I don't really believe that it's true. And so, obviously, I think that you have to take that into account as this being a film that's also a comedy, and so not to take things too seriously, but I honestly do think that many people seeing this film would not just view it as being funny or as a throwaway line, but as being based in fact and reality, as a lot of comedy is. And obviously, this is a film that is pretty funny. It's a movie that, even though it was made in the 1980s, still, I think, very much holds up as far as the comedic timing of all the various characters. There's, of course, that very iconic scene, which was very uncomfortable to watch for me, where you have Meg Ryan in the restaurant making a lot of noises, talking about faking it and all that stuff. And, of course, you have that great line by the woman saying, "I'll have what she's having." And obviously that is something that has been very much, well known in our society for a long time. As soon as you mention it, you're like, oh yeah, I know that scene, or I've heard of it, or I've seen reference to it. And so to actually watch it full force and to actually see the entire process, it was very uncomfortable. And I was like, I would not, I didn't like watching it in 2021. Can only imagine being someone back in 1989 in a movie theater with a significant other, watching that scene and not being like, this is a little uncomfortable for me. I know that obviously a lot of people would find it funny, but for me, I don't know. I just find it a little bit, a little bit on the uncomfortable side. And obviously that comes into play with just my focus on morality and faith, as this clearly is kind of not really holding up to that standard overall. But as you can see, I'm kind of very much struggling with this movie because there are parts that I thought were funny, and I thought the chemistry, most especially between Billy Crystal and between Meg Ryan, was very palpable and was very well done. And I think that the story focusing on their friendship also was very well done as well. The makeup effects, all those things, so different story elements I thought worked too. However, I will say that in the end, I did kind of have some issues with some aspects of the story because of the focus on divorce, remarriage, and just, sex outside of marriage and things like that. And those are issues that I've never liked being in films, because when movies start to focus on those elements and they start to be presented as comedy especially, it starts to make it a lot easier for culture and society to be able to accept those things, because basically you kind of destigmatize it in certain ways, and also you kind of in various ways and various elements also are able to kind of just showcase that, oh yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's like in today's television, right? Now we're at the point where almost every single show you watch just has random sex scenes, right? Has random moments that in previous eras and previous times would not have even been thought of as being the norm. And I don't like how you look to older films like this. It's kind of setting the path. And I know that I might be overanalyzing or overthinking it, but it is still something. When you turn something into a joke, when you turn something into a comedy, it does have an impact on how one views it. So you might have had a lot of people who before this movie would have, had they heard a story, or had they had a friend or a family member that was in a similar situation like this, would have thought of it probably very differently. But the fact that it was presented in a very smart way, because I'm not going to deny the fact that it is very smartly written and that it is very cleverly written, and that there are moments that obviously I think just naturally bring about laughter. But when you really start to deep dive into the effect that can have on the individual, when again you turn something into a joke, into a source of laughter, it does have that long-term impact I don't think a lot of people typically would think about in that way. So probably a lot more overanalyzation of this film than you would probably want at any point. Also kind of interesting to see that there was like a 22-year-old Harry Connick Jr. who actually did a lot of the songs for this movie. And as someone from New Orleans especially, it was interesting to see how young Harry Connick Jr. was when he got started in his career. Like I knew that he was a very talented person. I know people in my life who had interactions with him as a teenager. So again, because of the fact that I'm from New Orleans, and so there are these various connections to be made. But it was just interesting. I had no idea that so young, when he was like 22 or so, that he was actually like being brought into what is now seen as one of the most iconic films in the rom-com genre. So overall, I do think there are some good things in this film from an objective standard, but then my own subjective reality, right? My own subjective morality, I think, does have an impact on the way in which I look at this film when trying to look at it in a more critical lens and trying to break things down in that way. Because even when I was watching the movie, I was like, there are things in this movie that I think are really funny. I think that they're very well done, well presented. Again, I think that Meg Ryan, as I said, and Billy Crystal both are able to show that chemistry. And Billy Crystal is just a masterclass, right? He is so great at this character. He's so great at being someone who is this both despicable and likable at the same time. And he's always been able to, fall into these different roles and just really show his acting chops as such. But it does, again, have that other element to the story that did bother me as I was watching the movie overall. But there are, again, a lot of really cool things about it. Like Rob Reiner made this movie. It's interesting. It says the origins of the film were derived from Reiner's return to single life after a divorce. An interview Ephron conducted with Reiner provided the basis for Harry. Sally was based on Ephron and some of her friends. Crystal came on board and made his own contributions to the screenplay, making Harry funnier. And that is something that has been very much a part of Billy Crystal's career, right? He always has been able to bring his own brand of comedy to any of the roles that he's done. And it would be interesting to find out exactly how much of the script and how many of the lines that he had was actually just Billy Crystal riffing and Billy Crystal just doing his own thing, because we see this happen in not just a lot of the films that he's done, but typically with a lot of comedic actors. Typically, some of the best lines and most iconic lines in history are usually not actually written by writers, but are actually improv and made up on the spot by very clever people, as obviously Billy Crystal is. So overall, I would say that I enjoyed this movie. I thought that objectively there were a lot of strong things about it. I can see why this movie has endured for as long as it has, why it is seen again as this quintessential romantic comedy. But again, for me, going in that subjective lens, I do wonder and question about the impact that these kinds of stories, because obviously it's not just When Harry Met Sally, but other stories like this that very much normalize this lifestyle and these choices and these things and these types of relationships, the kind of impact, especially from a comedy perspective, because again, when you're laughing at something, you take it not nearly as seriously, and that can obviously wear down moral fiber. That can very much wear down moral fortitude, and I think that we don't often realize the kind of impact that that can have on a culture, on a society, or also on the individual person as well. So if I had to give this film a grade, I'd give it a solid B. I think that there are a lot of strong things in this movie, but my subjective view definitely has an impact on the way that I view this movie and other films like it. And this obviously is something that I think the more and more as I grow up and I go through life, I'm gonna think about as far as other films are concerned and the impact that those films have, and the realization that I, at the time of watching a movie or as I'm going through movies, don't realize the impact that these types of things can have on the individual. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this movie, and what are your thoughts about When Harry Met Sally? And also, am I a little off base here talking about the various elements? Please let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button, line up that fire button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my July Patreon and Subscribestar members: Andrew Hoyle, Biffer de Hobbit, Brian P., Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina B, and Tina Bojan. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon, and also to my Subscribestar members: Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J. Ra, the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for being here today. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single live stream and video on the channel, please make sure to check out the links in the description of ways that you can support me over on Patreon and Subscribestar as well. It gives you access to things like giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, and digital codes. Also, access to a podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where we have a lot of fun. We also answer Q&A questions as well. And also you might get access to the Chosen of Valhalla level, which gives you access to a once-a-month podcast exclusively where I bring on you to the main channel with everyone else who is at the level, and we all just talk about movies, pop culture, and tons of fun stuff like that. And also, of course, Tina, who is the Empress of the Universe, is going to give us tons of reviews of movies and also maybe a couple of awesome rants here and there as well. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure you go ahead and check out those links. Again, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.